Well, with us now is a brilliant constitutional attorney. He is the Felix Frankfurter Professor of Law Emeritus at Harvard Law School. Professor, you have a new book out called Trumped Up, Criminalizing Politics is Dangerous. Well, why is that?
It's extremely dangerous to argue that every time a political figure you disagrees with does something that you disagree with, that it's a crime. They've added something new to their arsenal. Now, if they disagree with you, they call you a racist. So they use the term crime, they use the term racist as weapons to try to silence their opponents. I was called a racist by Congresswoman Maxine Waters and others, because I made the observation that no criminal lawyer would disagree with, that the prosecutor has obtained a tactical advantage by moving the case from Virginia, which is a swing state, to the District of Columbia, which is 95% Democratic. Nobody would disagree with that point, but suddenly I'm a racist. Suddenly Donald Trump is a criminal because you disagree with his political points of view. This is very dangerous. It distorts terms like criminal and racist and makes them less powerful because it's crying wolf. If you call everybody a racist, no one is a racist. If you call everybody a criminal, no one is a criminal. And it's a very serious infringement on civil liberties to be arguing politics by throwing around terms like crime and racism.
You made a very cogent statement a year or so ago that the President of the United States cannot obstruct justice if he talks to his Attorney General or the FBI head to discuss a case. Would you elaborate on that, please?
Well, my precedent for that is no one other than Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson insisted that his Attorney General prosecute Aaron Burr. Every president in modern history has had contact with the Justice Department. The president is, after all, head of the unitary executive. The Justice Department works for the president. It's part of the executive branch. And the president can make the decision who to prosecute and who not to prosecute. It's not the right way to handle things. I would not urge the president to do that, but there's nothing illegal about a president instructing the Justice Department who to prosecute and who not to prosecute. There's long historical precedent. That's another example of people taking things they disagree with and suddenly saying, oh, that's an obstruction of justice. That's a crime. It's just historical nonsense.
He goes before Congress, testimony says, I think there was obstruction of justice, and therefore we ought to call for a special prosecutor. The next thing you know, his close friend Mueller is named special prosecutor. But you say that there was no crime, there was no obstruction of justice in that discussion between him and the president. Is that right?
I think that's absolutely correct. But what Comey did was much worse. He didn't just go in front of Congress or go in front of the media. He leaked the material and laundered it through a law professor friend. And when the former head of the FBI is now doing the leaking instead of stopping the leaking, something wrong is happening in this country. He set a terrible, terrible precedent and should never have been involved in leaking material and laundering it through a law professor. That's just not the way the FBI should operate.
Rosenstein said, well, we really need to limit what Mueller's going to do, but how is that going to be done? He's got like a fishing license, and you also mentioned the fact that he's moved the grand jury from Virginia to Washington, which is primarily Democratic, and he's loaded up his staff with pro-Hillary Clinton supporters. Isn't that a bit of a conflict?
Well, reasonably we could disagree about whether or not people on his staff can be fair, whether the District of Columbia can afford a fair trial. All I said was that he got a tactical advantage by moving it from Virginia, which is a swing state, to the District of Columbia, which is overwhelmingly Democratic. I don't think there's a criminal defense lawyer in the world who would disagree with that statement, and yet it resulted in me being called a racist. And on CNBC last night, I was asked by the commentator, am I being paid by Donald Trump? And I'm called kind of a Trump lackey. I supported Hillary Clinton. I'm a liberal Democrat. I'm not doing this for Donald Trump. I'm doing this for all Americans as a civil libertarian. If Hillary Clinton had gotten elected and people were screaming, lock her up, and trying to create crimes to charge her with, I would be saying the same thing. And the people who today hate me would love me, and the people who today love me would hate me. That's what it means to be a civil libertarian. Sometimes what you say helps one side, sometimes it helps the other. That's not the reason I'm doing it. I'm doing it to help the civil liberties of all Americans who suffer when we turn political differences into crime. And that's the thesis of my book, Trumped Up, why the criminalization of politics endangers American democracy.
I want to ask you another question about the limits. Under the rules of the Justice Department, a special prosecutor is supposed to investigate specific crimes. There has to be a crime. And what is the crime? And is he restricted to investigations of that matter? Or can he just go on a fishing expedition and help himself to wherever he can find anything?
Well, we know what happened with Bill Clinton. They started out investigating financial corruption in Whitewater, found nothing, and ended up investigating him for Monica Lewinsky for a sex act. There are very, very few restrictions on what an independent counsel, a special counsel, special prosecutor can do. They follow what they see. And, you know, I always analogize it to the great book by Herman Melville, Moby Dick. Captain Ahab had an obsession. He had to get the white whale, even if it cost him his life and the life of his crew. And I think when you have a special counsel, they have to find somebody. If they don't, they will have wasted the taxpayers' money. And that's what's wrong with bringing somebody on board and saying, we want you to find crimes. It reminds me of what Lavrenti Beria, the head of the KGB, said to Joseph Stalin. He said, show me the man, and I'll find you the crime. You can find criminal activities against almost anybody who's involved in complicated business, complicated politics. If you look hard enough, and if your goal is to find criminal activity, that's not the way democracy should operate. By the way, we're not the only country that's suffering from that. In Israel today, Prime Minister Netanyahu is being hounded by trivial charges of criminal conduct, that maybe he took some cigars or champagne, or his wife took some trays of food, and they're trying to get him out of office, not politically, not through the legal means, but through some efforts to try to criminalize political differences. So this is a spreading phenomenon that endangers democracy all over the world.
You very cogently suggested a little while ago that there should be a presidential commission. If they want to talk about Russia, let a commission do it. Can we transition, do you think, from this special prosecutor or special counsel to a presidential commission and shut Mueller down, or is that possible in today's world?
I think we made a mistake. We should never have had a special counsel because I didn't see any evidence of crime. We should have had an independent commission, bipartisan, nonpartisan, of the kind that was appointed after 9/11, to look into the impact of Russia on elections. That's not a Democrat-Republican issue. That's an American issue. If the Russians are trying to impact our election, doesn't matter whether they're doing it to help one side or another. They shouldn't be doing it. And if we had an independent commission, we'd already know what was going on because it would be done in the open. Instead, a grand jury is always done in secret. So we're not going to find out what actually went on with Russia unless and until the grand jury decides to indict. And if it decides not to indict, we'll have learned nothing. And if it decides to indict, there may be guilty pleas, so we'll never know what happened. It was the wrong vehicle, the wrong mechanism for trying to get the kind of information that all Americans are entitled to. Namely, did Russia try to influence the outcome, not only this election, but previous elections, and will they try to influence the outcome of future elections?
Can we shift at this point in the narrative from the special counsel to a commission, as you suggest? Can it be done?
It'll be very difficult to do that, but I think appointing a special commission would still be a good idea. And it would take a lot of the steam away from the special counsel because he operates in secret. He operates behind closed doors without the defendants having their lawyer present. Grand juries hear only one side of the evidence, only one side. That's why it was said by the chief judge of New York, a prosecutor can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. It's the easiest thing in the world because all they hear is one side. Whereas a commission would hear all sides of the issue, would even invite the Russians to come and testify, would invite Democrats, Republicans. We would hear everything, but now we're not going to hear anything because it's behind closed doors.
Professor, brilliant analysis. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.